Okay, here we are in the kitchen, and I'm now going to do some underglaze painting on this little pot that I started outside on the wheel. And I now have to think about what brushes to use, and I need to practice my strokes a little bit. So I've been working on this piece of paper bag. It's a good absorbency for practicing underglaze, and we are getting a lot of paper bags these days because we're not supposed to take our own bags anymore to the grocery store. So I'm going to work now with some different colors. This one is this was called Amethyst, and it fires to a dark purple. And you want to think about your brushes. What brush? So I tried various brushes. I've got this tiny brush, and I was trying to see, and it actually makes a really nice stroke, but it's so small that the flowers are coming out really small. I can't really get a wider stroke from it. I guess maybe I could if I lay it down. Oh, maybe I will use that. So there's other possible brushes. You need a flexible brush that will make a point. This brush is not very flexible, and I can't get it to come to a nice little point at the end. So I'm not going to use that one. And then this is a Japanese brush. Actually, I think it's maybe Chinese brush, but anyway, they're the same style. And this one will hold a lot more color and will make a point. So I'm going to try that one. This brush is a little bit old, and it's not as springy as it once was, so I'm not getting a very good lift off from it. So in order to get this fine point at the end of the stroke, you drag the brush, lifting it off at the same time. That was a better one. So lifting off and dragging will give you that little sharp point at the end of the stroke. And then for the leaves, I have this brush, which is what's called a liner brush. It's very long, and it's very flexible, and it also will make a good point. So for leaves, you always want to fill your brush quite full. I didn't fill it quite full enough there. I'll try it again. And that was better. And again, it was a slow lift off and drag at the end. This type of brush, these Asian brushes, and this one, these are used traditionally in calligraphy, Asian calligraphy. They are designed to be able to make different kinds of strokes just by how you hold the brush and how you press it. We want to practice these strokes a lot before you do it on your pot. So as you press down, the stroke gets wider, and as you lift off, it gets narrower. That's the kind of responsiveness we want. I'm going to start with some of the flowers. So here's my little pot, and you can see the color a little bit better now. This is the finished one. The lid fits terribly on this one, which is why I still have it. to remind me, don't do that. So when I was trimming the lid, I was not careful, and I look at all that movement. That's way too much. But it's a good example of this kind of use of underglaze. So you see that background color, it's kind of a orangey yellow color. I actually want a little bit more color on this one, so I'm hoping, because I put it on a little stronger, that you'll see it more. That's the hope. We never know until things are fired. So now, this is where you have to really just drop my brush on the floor, and I don't want the cat to walk in the underglaze. Underglazes are not edible, and you need to be staying real clean when you work with them. So I will clean that up after I make this video. Be sure that you're washing everything well after you work. So what I was starting to say is, now that I've got my background color down, I really have to just think this through and not mess it up. If I mess it up, I can wipe it all off with a sponge, but that means I'm going to have to go back and do all of this stuff for, all the things I did first, I'm going to have to do all over again. So I'm going to try not to mess up. But it's not a disaster if you mess up. It really isn't. You can just wipe it off and start over. You have to use a damp sponge. But I'll just try to have faith that I'm going to do it all right. If your brush skips a little bit, that's fine. It's kind of understood where it would have gone if you'd gone a little farther. It's always better to just let the stroke be what it is. Don't try to fix it. If you try to fix it, it's going to look awkward. It's better to just have some things that you missed. I'll try to make it perfect, because there's no such thing as perfect, and when things look confident, that's better than perfect. I'm hoping that I don't do something bad on this, but if I do, I can wipe it off, start the whole process again. And you might think, oh, that's too much trouble, but think about how much trouble it was to make the pot, right? Do you really want to just have an ugly pot when you're done? No, you don't. You should just redo the underglaze rather than fire a pot that's not going to be right. Well, we'll see if I do this well enough, or if I have to start over. It really helps to have practiced. I did quite a bit on the piece of paper bag before starting. So how do I know where these leaves are going to go? I don't. It's just, I'm hoping they'll not too screwy. If you, how can I describe how you can lay this out in your head without having to make any marks beforehand. Now see, there was an example of skipping. So I was trying to avoid the petal, but I wanted to come down right after it and I missed it, but it's still better. I'm going to turn this where you can see. It's better not to try to fix that. It's better to just let it be. And I think that, that's really the solution to a lot of our nervousness about where to go with these things, is just be prepared to let it be. Now, up here I've got a flower that's way up in the air, and I'm going to have to bring this stem way down. So I'm actually going to start with the flower. And there's where it attaches. And then I can kind of eyeball, okay, I don't want to go on top of these leaves. I don't, it's okay to cross them, but I don't want to like double them or something. So I'm going to just try to aim. So think about where you're headed and aim for it. Something that's happening here is, I'll let you see it here, is I'm actually going over the black line. I didn't really want to do that, but excuse me, I had to sneeze. I didn't really want to do that, but I don't want there to be an obvious stopping point there either. So what I'm going to do is, after this is all done, I will take it back to the wheel, do that tomorrow, and I'll lay down some black underglaze on top of it. So remember I mentioned that underglazes are opaque. Almost all underglazes are opaque. There are some that are made to be transparent, but that's not the case with these Amico velvets. So I know that I can cover up those lines. So this is what I've got. Now, to me, that looks sort of incomplete. And what I'm going to do in a little while is I'm going to do some sgraffito on it, and the sgraffito will really make it work. Also noticing that some of them, the underglaze is a little too thin. So I did mention that you should not try to correct a mistake, but you can go over the top if your strokes are very sure. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to go over some of these, but you have to be really confident then, because you don't want the line to be thicker in one place and thinner in another because your hand was not confident. So you got to look ahead, see where you're going. And then you can stay right on top of that line, you'll be all right. Also, the sgraffitoing is going to help that. Anything that's a little unsure, the sgraffito will really help. I'm just going to go over them because underglaze doesn't look quite thick enough. If you can see through it, it's not really quite thick enough. unless you want to see through it. But I don't on these leaves. So, just about got enough here. And then I'm going to carve through these lines. This is one of the advantages of doing your underglaze on greenware. You can do it on bisque. It's perfectly fine to do it on bisque, but you won't be able to sgraffito it in the same way. I not always need to do that, but sometimes that's what you want to do. So here we are. There it is. Now, I'm going to take, you do this with a needle, or my favorite tool for this job is this little tool that's got the little hooked spear shape, and it's quite sharp. So I'm just going to start going through. So if you look at how it is on here, there are all these little white lines in there. That's the clay body showing through. This is a white clay. So I'm just going to emphasize these lines. And I always feel like it's, for me, because I'm more of a potter than I am a painter, I always feel if I can dig into the clay, that my lines are more sure. So that's the advantage of doing this sgraffito. I think it just makes it very nice. Okay, what do you do with all these crumbs? Do not blow. Please don't blow into the air. You need to just gently shake them off. We don't want to be inhaling clay dust, and particularly if it has colorants in it. This stuff is not good for you. We're going to be putting a glaze over it, so it's going to be safely confined underneath a glaze. But in the raw state, we need to be careful with these materials. Okay, so already you see how much more vivid that pattern is because of doing the sgraffito. It's really a good way to finish off an underglaze design. You don't always have to do, nothing is always in ceramics. Oh, there's probably some things that are always. Always get the dust off your bisqueware before you glaze. That's an always. But so many technical things, that are artistic choices can be done many different ways. So watch out when somebody tells you there's only one way, because it's just not true. Someday I'm going to learn how you speed up videos. So you don't have to watch every minute of it, but I don't know how to do that yet. Okay, so I just gently brushed that off, and I'm putting all these crumbs are going on to this paper here. Then I'm going to clean up afterwards with my pottery sponge. I'm not going to use my kitchen sponge, so I want to keep all of this colorant material completely separate. Now, I just made a little mistake here. I went into the purple where I didn't mean to, but that's okay because irises have extra lines. And I actually really want to put some of those lines in. So let me just do some of that here. So the extra lines are the little lines that go down, you know, they're like veins or something. And for that I'm going to use this end of the tool, there you go, which is very sharp because I want this to be an extra fine line. And I think these little extra lines, besides just being nice in themselves, really give the feeling of this flower. You see it adds quite a bit of kind of sensitive detail. Now the buds, because they're wrapped, I'm going to run those lines this way. Now we're getting to something that more resembles the actual flower. But I'm not trying to be a perfectionist at all with this. Just, it's more important to have a feeling of life, you know, and life is messy. So I'm just very gently brushing because I don't want to be inhaling this dust. So that's why you don't want to blow. Just slowly and carefully. Just gently shake it off. Okay, so this is how I'm getting it off. Just very gently. And because the underglaze that's on there won't smear, you can rub it. You just have to rub real gently. Now I'm going to put just a few lines into the leaves themselves. So again, I'm using this very fine point. If the leaves were a little wider, I'd probably do more of this, but they're pretty narrow, so I don't think I'm going to do too much of that. But now we've got a pattern that is a lot more vivid than it was originally. And that's the goal. So I'll be finishing the inside very similarly. So this is going to be, it'll be a little bit like this. It'll be somewhat different. And then this outside pattern is done the same way. Um, this is a color called leaf green. It's dark, and this one's called seafoam green. So these colors change every once in a while. You think, oh, I know that color, and then they don't make it anymore. So you have to look at the current catalog and see what's out there. Also, you want to be checking to make sure that what what you're using is appropriate for the firing temperature that you're doing. So always look for that on these color charts, because a lot of these underglazes will be a different color if you fire them higher or lower. So that's the idea. And underglazes can be used on all kinds of different projects. If you are not working with white clay, if you're working with a white slip on top of dark clay, then you're going to have a different result when you sgraffito. But that can be very, very nice too. So just try these things. It's really just, it's a matter of trying it out and seeing what you like to do best.